Good stuff right there, Dan. Do you like what you've seen from Shedeur so far?
I do. He's playing faster. That's probably the biggest gripe of him coming out of school. This is an elite throw under a real NFL pocket. You cannot play and/or throw it better than those clips right there.
In one of the most stunning reversals in NFL analyst history, Dan Orlovsky has been forced to eat every single word of criticism he ever threw at Shedeur Sanders. And folks, this isn't just a slight change of opinion. This is a complete and total 80-degree turn that has left the entire football world watching in disbelief. For those who remember, Orlovsky didn't just question Shedeur Sanders' ability, he outright dismissed it. The processing speed? Too slow for the NFL. The athleticism? Average at best. The ability to handle NFL pressure? Questionable. Orlovsky stood on national television and laid out all the reasons why Shedeur Sanders wouldn't translate to the professional level. He was one of the loudest voices telling everyone to pump the brakes, to not get caught up in the hype, to remember that college success doesn't mean NFL readiness. But then something incredible happened, something that has forced Dan Orlovsky to do the one thing analysts hate doing most, admitting they were completely, undeniably, embarrassingly wrong.
You know, so a lot of people want to see me fail, and that ain't gonna happen.
One of the things for Shedeur coming out of the draft that I was critical of was like, I don't think he's a ridiculous athlete, not a high-end athlete, kind of average. I do. He's playing faster. That's probably the biggest gripe of him coming out of school.
Playing faster. The biggest gripe. The red flag that scouts circled in blood red ink. The criticism that was supposed to keep Shedeur Sanders from ever becoming an NFL starter. And now Dan Orlovsky is watching tape and admitting that the exact thing he criticized, the thing he said would doom Shedeur's NFL career, is no longer a problem. In fact, it has become one of his greatest strengths. This is the same Dan Orlovsky who questioned if Shedeur deserved first-team reps, the same guy who questioned Shedeur's processing speed, the same analyst who doubted Shedeur's arm talent, now breaking down throws that only franchise quarterbacks make. You cannot play it better. That is not qualified praise. That is not he is improving or he is showing promise or let's see if he can do it consistently. That is Dan Orlovsky looking at Shedeur Sanders' tape and declaring it is as good as quarterback play gets in the National Football League. So what changed? How did Shedeur Sanders go from being dismissed as too slow, not athletic enough, and lacking NFL readiness to being praised as elite by the very same people who doubted him? How did a quarterback who supposedly had fundamental flaws force a complete reversal from one of the league's most prominent analysts? Let us rewind to where this all started, because understanding the full context makes Dan Orlovsky's reversal even more stunning. The Cleveland Browns are a disaster, a complete organizational train wreck that somehow managed to get messier with every passing week. Dillon Gabriel takes a brutal hit in the second quarter against Baltimore with Cleveland leading. He is down. He is not getting back up. Concussion protocol, and everyone knows what that means. Enter Shedeur Sanders, the backup who supposedly wasn't ready, the rookie who supposedly hadn't earned first-team reps, the quarterback who Dan Orlovsky said needed to prove to me you can't do it before getting real opportunity. But here is where the story takes an absolutely insane turn that makes Dan's criticism look even worse in hindsight.
This is an elite throw under a real NFL pocket. You cannot play and/or throw it better than those clips right there.
Prove it to me. Show me you deserve it. Demonstrate NFL readiness. But Dan, how is a rookie quarterback supposed to prove anything when his own team won't even let the offensive line hear his voice before throwing him into the fire? The hypocrisy is stunning, because just weeks earlier, after watching Shedeur's preseason performance against Carolina, Dan was singing a completely different tune. He praised Shedeur's comfort, control, processing speed, and poise. He said Shedeur looked like he had all the answers to the test. He said the Browns should be giving him first-team reps immediately. Prove me, you can't do it. That was Dan's message after the preseason. Shedeur looked so good that Dan wanted him getting starting opportunities. But then when Shedeur gets thrown into an impossible situation with zero preparation, suddenly it is pump the brakes. Suddenly, the standards change. Suddenly, the goalposts move. You can't have it both ways. But here is what makes this entire saga so beautifully satisfying. Shedeur Sanders didn't just bounce back from that Baltimore disaster. He came back and played at such an elite level that Orlovsky had no choice. Absolutely zero choice, but to reverse every criticism he ever made. The processing speed that was supposedly too slow, now elite. The athleticism that was supposedly average, making plays with his legs that impressed Dan. The ability to handle pressure that was supposedly questionable, delivering throws in NFL pockets that only high-level starters make.
Proof to me that he's absolutely demanding of more reps with the second and first teams, against the second and first teams.
So, I was critical of. Past tense. Dan is admitting his pre-draft evaluation was wrong. He is admitting the things he thought would be problems aren't actually problems. He is admitting Shedeur Sanders is better, significantly better than he gave him credit for. That is what eating your words looks like in real time. Dan Orlovsky broke down Shedeur's tape and what he found shocked him. The traditional bootleg execution was perfect. The 60-yard touchdown showed processing that only veterans typically display. The protection changes demonstrated NFL-level command. Every single thing Dan criticized was being done at an elite level, and the Browns saw it. They named Shedeur Sanders their starting quarterback for the rest of the season, not because of potential, not because of draft position, but because the tape proved he is the best quarterback on their roster right now. Week by week, there's been a step forward. The flaws are disappearing. He played at a very high level. That is Dan Orlovsky admitting the progression is real. That is Dan admitting Shedeur is eliminating the exact concerns he raised. That is Dan being forced by undeniable evidence to completely reverse his position. From pump the brakes to you cannot play it better. From questioning NFL readiness to praising high-level starting quarterback play. From skepticism to admiration. That is not just changing your mind. That is a complete reversal forced by tape that doesn't lie. And here is what makes this story even more compelling. Shedeur Sanders never stopped working, even when the Browns refused to give him reps, even when the organization treated him like an afterthought, even when analysts like Dan questioned whether he belonged.
Prove to me you can't do it. Prove to me you can't do it. And so far, he has not done that. I would actually be most encouraged by. One of the things for Shedeur coming out of the draft that I was critical of was, like, I don't think he's a ridiculous athlete, not a high-end athlete, kind of average. I thought he made some plays with his legs that I was really impressed with.
Every day in the film room, asking questions without fear, bringing energy to the locker room, staying poised under pressure. These are the intangibles you can't coach. These are the traits that separate good quarterbacks from great ones. And Shedeur Sanders has all of them. And yet when his opportunity finally came, he was ready. Despite the organizational failure, despite the lack of preparation, despite critics like Dan Orlovsky telling everyone to slow down, Shedeur Sanders proved he belonged at the highest level. Are there still areas to improve? Of course, he is a rookie. Dan himself pointed out a red zone play where Shedeur needed better drift, needed to beat the last defender with his throw.
But man, the stuff that you saw in college, and even in that Rams preseason game that gave you just some reservations, I think week by week, there's just been a little bit of a step forward in some of those flaws. This weekend, he played at a very high level. There's still issues, 100%. Down in the red zone, all-out pressure. You have to drift. I love the fact that he backpedals. You got to beat the last guy with the throw.
Asking questions, and he's not afraid to ask questions. So just for him to be, that poised rookie and stuff like that, that's not afraid to go out there, and throw the football.
Those are fixable with reps and experience. Those aren't fundamental flaws. Those aren't reasons to doubt whether a quarterback can succeed in the NFL. And that is the crucial distinction Dan Orlovsky finally understands. The things he criticized, the processing speed, the athleticism, the NFL readiness, those were supposed to be fundamental limitations. Those were supposed to be reasons Shedeur couldn't make it. But they were never real limitations. They were narratives. They were talking points. They were reasons for analysts to doubt without truly studying the tape. And now the tape has spoken with undeniable clarity. Shedeur Sanders processes at NFL speed. He makes elite throws under pressure. He plays faster than he did in college. He is proving every criticism wrong one game at a time. The Cleveland Browns now have 4 games left with Shedeur Sanders as their starting quarterback. 4 games to continue this remarkable progression. 4 games to prove he is the long-term answer. 4 games to cement his status as a legitimate NFL starter. And Dan Orlovsky will be watching every snap, analyzing every throw, breaking down every decision. And if Shedeur continues playing the way he has been, if he keeps processing at elite levels, keeps making throws that only high-level starters make, if he keeps proving the doubters wrong, Dan will have no choice but to keep praising him. Because you can't argue with the tape. You can't deny elite quarterback play. You can't ignore progression that is happening right before your eyes. Dan Orlovsky went from being one of Shedeur Sanders' harshest critics to one of his biggest admirers. That transformation didn't happen because Dan changed what he valued. This is what happens when talent meets opportunity. This is what happens when a quarterback refuses to let organizational failure, lack of preparation, or harsh criticism define his career. This is what happens when you are good enough to make even your biggest doubters admit they were wrong. Shedeur Sanders has silenced his critics like Dan Orlovsky to do the hardest thing in sports media: eat their words and admit defeat. The kid from Colorado is ready. The tape proves it, the progression confirms it, and now, finally, even the harshest critics are being forced to acknowledge it. The only question left is how long before everyone else catches up to what Dan Orlovsky has finally figured out. Shedeur Sanders is the real deal, and no amount of doubt, criticism, or organizational failure was ever going to change that.